On this one, I'm going to work backwards, and so the start point is where everything ends up, which is organizational culture. And when I think about organizational culture, it is in effect the aggregate sum of all people's behaviors. It just so happens that senior leaders, for example, have a more important impact on how the tone is set. And then when you work backwards from behaviors, you get to consciousness, which is hard and it's elusive. It's the way that each of us individually integrates all of thoughts, feelings, memories, good and bad, our wishes, and everything that we sense. And there are those that argue that this is unknowable, it's too subjective, too complex. But within the whole discussion of consciousness, I think there are some important insights and perspectives, and I've got a couple here. One is that our tendency is towards behavior that is habitual. An American psychologist, Donald Hebb's renown is captured in the phrase, "What fires together wires together," and he's talking about the neurons in our brain, and that repeated firing, in other words thinking, feeling, acting in a certain way, creates a wiring in our minds that he calls neural pathways. And once established, those are the ways of thinking and behaving that create a very strong bias in how we default to behave in the future. And one of the outcomes of this is that we find change very hard. And as I reflect on my anxiety, I realize that very often I was trapped into patterns of behavior which were very hard to change because I defaulted to the same way of thinking about things that were relatively hard to break out of, negative. Another perspective that I find compelling is the work of people like Lisa Feldman Barrett, who talks about the critical role that emotion plays in our wiring. And she proposes that the main drivers of both experience and behaviors are, one, interoception, which is how our mind interprets the signals from our body, and two, affect, the psychological definition, which means our underlying emotions or mood. And my personal belief is that emotion plays a fundamental role in how we show up at work, how we behave, what we experience, and how we learn. And the fact that cognition gets all the attention in organizations, I believe, is both a gap and an opportunity.